You're listening to Richard Vaughan Live.
Hello and welcome, welcome to another hour, to our second hour of today's interesting, what's today? Thursday edition of Richard Vaughan. Losing track of time, to lose track of. Yes, I'm losing track of time. I think it's old age. Yeah, today's Thursday, that's right. I think it's going to be Thursday all day long. And we have, as I said just before the break, we have a special guest here, a good friend of mine, a person I've known for, I guess, since about 2008. Yeah, so 10 years. It's the 10th anniversary of our friendship. And we worked together. We've fought against each other. We've done but we're still friends. We're still friends after all these years, yeah. And what's interesting about Steve Matlin, whom I'm introducing now, Steve Matlin, he's an American who's been living in Spain for about 25 years, maybe. He can clarify this better than me, is that he's the founder, promoter, and chief executive officer of a very interesting high-tech startup in the area of biology and microbiology, in the area of health. And so by the name of Life Length, Longitud Vital, Longitud de Vida, Life Length, because as you know, the world of medical research, medicine in general, is advancing quite interestingly in many different avenues and fields. Some people say, some experts or pseudo-experts, I don't know, but many people, respectable people say that that very soon we can reach age 150, and some people even say that we can reverse the aging process. And this is being achieved in laboratories of reversing the aging process. And maybe immortality is just around the corner. I think I'll get there a little bit too late. Just missed it. I'm the last of the Mohicans here. Yo quiero ser el penúltimo de los Mohicanos, no el último. Okay. But in any case, they never say the next to the last of the Mohicans. But Steve, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Richard.
How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
This is very early for you or normal?
No, I'm glad. No, it's not early. It's great.
Okay. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, Steve is the founder and promoter and head of Life Length. Now, Life Length is a company devoted to, Steve?
It's a company devoted to improving human health.
That's very generic.
Yeah.
Me too.
Well,
I mean, if you know English better, it improves your human health, okay? So we're in the same business, right? Not exactly.
We're focused on a very special area of biology, which is one of the principal causes of aging, which is something called telomere diagnostics or telomere measurement.
Telomere diagnostics or
telomere measurement.
All right. What's telomere?
Well, a telomere are the caps found inside the chromosomes of our DNA.
The caps.
The caps, the tips.
The tips, las puntas.
That's right.
Found within our?
Within our chromosomes.
Chromosomos or ADN, within our DNA or
That's
chromosomes.
Right.
The tips.
That's right. So every human being, every living creature is comprised of cells. Inside our cells are the nuclei, which contains the DNA that encodes for who we are. And inside those strands of DNA, at the ends of what are called linear strands of DNA, are small protective caps, like the little plastic caps on the ends of shoelaces.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, on our chromosomes, we have at either end, right? At the tips, las puntas. Even Donald Trump has this. Yeah, I'm afraid so. Okay. All right. So I have something in common with Donald Trump. Okay. Very good. So at the tip, there's what they call telomere. Now, the closest the closest parallelism to a telomere would to take un cordón de zapato, de hombre, más bien. And at the end, you have this little plastic I don't know, the little plastic, I don't know what you call it, but that's similar to
There's a name for that, actually.
I don't know what to call it.
Egglet.
Egglet at the end of the shoelaces, los cordones de los zapatos, los telómeros. That is like the telomeres at the end of our chromosomes.
That's right. Just like the little plastic tip will keep the shoelace from unraveling,
Yeah.
and if it breaks off, your shoelaces will unravel. The telomeres protect the DNA in the process of cellular replication. So all of our cells in our body continue to divide during our life, almost all of the cells. And as these cells divide, the mechanism by which cells divide is slightly imperfect. And what these telomeres do is they serve as a buffer to ensure that the chromosomes, the rest of the chromosome, which is encoding and expressing the proteins and the genes that make us who we are, is a perfect copy. And so they're gradually whittled away. They're gradually used up.
So they gradually reduce in size, or they slowly disappear.
That's right. And that is the principal reason we age.
That's the principal reason we get older
That's right.
and finally die.
That's right.
It's the telomeres' fault.
That's right.
Well, it's not it's their reduction.
It's the shortening, or the attrition, as we say, of the telomeres over time.
And can this be reversed or stopped?
So this is what we're working on. So this is what a lot of people are working on, of course.
So you're working towards immortality.
Well, let's say we're working towards maximizing human health and lifespan.
Maximizing human health and lifespan. Ladies and gentlemen, lifespan means life expectancy, how long you're going to live, okay? And improving the quality of life during this period.
Very much so, because essentially the expression of what happens when you lose your telomeres is your body begins to break down. And I'll give you a very simple analogy of how telomere biology can be seen by all of us. Think about when you were 5 years old and you fell down and skinned your knee. You fell on your skateboard and you skinned your knee. And how in 2-3 days that was completely healed.
All right. To heal is sanar or curarse. So, yeah, you fall down, a 5-year-old boy, and you hurt your knee. It's bleeding, and you have a scab, costra. Yeah, but in a question of 3 days?
Yeah, and your mom puts a Band-Aid on it, and like new in 2-3 days or a week at the most, it's gone.
How do you say Band-Aid in British English?
Una tirita, no?
In British English.
In British English.
I bet you don't know.
I can't remember.
Plaster.
That's right.
A plaster.
That's right.
Okay.
I should have remembered that. My mother was English.
All right.
Now, if we think about, you're midlife, you're 40, you're 50 years old, and you fall down again, and you do the same thing. But now it takes a lot longer to heal.
I didn't know that. It does.
Yeah. And then if we take it to the extreme, one of the reasons that very elderly people will get infections and sometimes have very serious health problems is those when they fall down and hurt themselves, those wounds won't heal.
Okay.
And that is because the telomeres in the cells that need to reproduce to heal those wounds are exhausted. They have no, what is called replicative capacity left to generate new tissue.
Capacidad de replicación. Replicative capacity. That sounds cool. All right.
So now imagine that happening not only in your skin, but in your heart, your lungs, all of your tissues, your brain.
All right.
And ultimately, that is what leads us down the path towards what is called cellular senescence.
Okay, so what exactly does life length do in this field of research or this field of medical practice?
So we are a diagnostic laboratory. We're a Spanish company, despite the name.
Life Length is 100% Spanish.
100% Spanish company.
Run by a guidi.
Run by a guidi.
Run by an American.
That's right. Well, a guidi españolizada.
All right.
And we are headquartered here in Madrid. Our laboratories are here in Madrid. We're about 35 people in the company. And we are actually the only laboratory in Spain that is U.S. FDA certified. So we're very proud to have achieved that. And
excuse me, you're the only laboratory in Spain.
Yep.
Laboratory. The British say laboratory. Okay. You're the only laboratory that is what?
Accredited by the U.S. federal government.
Accredited by the U.S. federal, but you said something else. You said
The FDA.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen.
The Food and Drug Administration.
Right. The FDA is the equivalent of, I think, InSalud or similar in Spain. The Food and Drug Administration is a very powerful organization in the United States that approves food and pharmaceutical products for the market. If you don't have the approval of the FDA in the U.S., you cannot sell food or drugs, pharmaceutical products.
Or laboratory testing.
Or laboratory testing. And in Spain?
And in Spain, we're accredited, of course, by the Spanish government, by the Consejería de Salud de la Comunidad de Madrid, which is the regulatory agency for labs. And, of course, in Spain, medical laboratories are supervised at the autonomous level, at the regional level. So we have all of our licenses. And then we have something called an ISO, which is acknowledged and accepted in more than 65 countries.
El ISO 9000 o ISO qué?
The one that we have is very specific. It's called the ISO 15189. And the 5-digit codes in ISO are specific to industry. And so 15189 is for clinical laboratories. All right. So we've worked very, very hard to get all of
But you're the only lab in Spain with FDA approval.
That's right.
From the U.S.
Right.
Why is that necessary?
Because we sell in the U.S. We sell our testing services to physicians, to hospitals, to pharmaceutical companies, to researchers in more than 40 countries around the world. And one of our principal markets is the United States.
How long did it take you to get that approval?
Years.
Yeah.
Years.
All right. Took a long time.
Very difficult. There's only about 40 labs in the entire world outside of the United States that have this accreditation.
Okay.
The U.S. government is not very fond of giving out licenses to laboratories that they can't visit easily and that are somewhere within the 50 states.
But they decided that life length was warranted or merited this type of...
After submission of 3,500 pages of documentation and paying for them to come here to visit us and inspect our facilities, yes.
Okay.
And that's an annual process that we have to do every
year. So
you're
a diagnostic company, so you perform diagnoses.
That's right.
How?
So we basically measure telomeres from human beings, or in some cases even from animals. We're doing studies as well on animals, typically from blood samples.
So if I'm... Well, what can I learn if I go to you? I mean, why should I go to your company?
Right. So
what's the benefit for me?
The benefit of this test is it's because it's going to establish what is your true biological age.
My biological age.
We can think about two concepts of ages. We can say chronological age. What does it say on your DNI? What is your
age?
What is your birth date? But aging is actually a very heterogeneous process. That means that all people...
Proceso heterogéneo. It's a very heterogeneous process.
It is.
Aging.
Getting
old.
O
sea, entrando en edad.
And again, we can think about that very easily. We can think about friends of ours who are imagine someone who's 50 or 60 and who has serious health problems and can barely do sports or can really have a lot of constrictions, and other individuals with that same age who look and feel and act and have the physical and mental acuity of someone 20 years younger.
Okay.
And this has to do with how, of course, there's a genetic component. For example, in your case, you're going to live to be 200. That's clear.
I don't think so. But in any case,
I think you'll make it to the immortality stage.
Yeah? All right.
So there's a genetic component that we inherit from our parents, people who have, there are many studies that have been done that there are societies like in Japan and small villages in Italy and other places where people have tremendous longevity. So there is a hereditary component. But the other factors that influence on our aging process are where we live. Of course, it's not the same to live imagine a terribly contaminated city like the cities now in China with all the pollution and contamination, terrible air quality. That ages us because that exposure to those toxic particles in the air hurts our bodies and causes the cells to divide more quickly because they're damaged and they divide faster as a consequence. And then the third and probably the most critical factor for all of us is how we live our lives, our own lifestyle. Do we exercise, or do we have a sedentary life? Do we have a good diet, or do we not have a good diet? Or are we obese, or do we take care to control our body weight? Do we abuse smoke, tobacco, alcohol, drugs, or do we constrain ourselves and limit that? Do we have a lot of stress in our lives? Do we get enough sleep? All of these factors have been shown to impact on the rate of aging, and we can measure this from this blood sample, and we can say that someone who's 50 may be biologically 40 or 60. And that for a physician is very insightful because you can then treat that individual at their biological age.
Okay, good. For example, if I go, I need a blood test. I need to submit to a blood test, un análisis de sangre. Okay, fine. So you extract blood.
One tube.
One tube.
One little tube of blood. It's nothing.
All right, good. Now, they extract the blood and then you test it, or you under the microscope.
It goes off to our laboratory.
Where's your laboratory?
The laboratory is located in the Parque Científico de Madrid, in the campus of the Autónoma in Canto Blanco.
All right.
We're in a scientific park. We're in one of the best scientific parks in Spain, along with a number of other small companies. And it's a fantastic facility, and we're lucky to be there.
Okay. So you test my blood, and then you tell me how old I am biologically.
Yeah.
You say, "Hey, you're younger than your son," or you're an old man. For example, if you tell me, if I have a blood sample, I provide a blood sample. You test it, and you come back to me and say you're 54 biologically. Now, my plus or minus what margin of error is common in this?
All lab tests have some what's called coefficient of variation, meaning if you take the same blood sample and you run it 3 times in a lab, even the most common test like a cholesterol test or a glucose test will give slightly different results. Our results are normally below 5% to 3% variation if we take the same sample and repeat it over and over.
So if you say I'm 54, it means I'm probably biologically between 51 and 57, or 52 and 56.
Approximately, that's right.
So that provides the person with a very good idea, or that person's doctor, with a very good idea of the person's.
That's right. We offer our services typically through physicians, but we can also work directly with individuals. We have our own medical director, our own scientific director. We have a very strong staff.
Is it expensive to get these things?
It's not expensive. It's not an expensive.
For example, if I go, how much do I have to pay? If I want to do it only on my own, not through a doctor. Just curious. I want to know my biological age.
So in all of Europe, the patient price is 349 euros.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you think about the sophistication of what's going into this test, which I can describe a little bit, and at the fact that it's a test that you would do, you'd want to do it once, and then you'd want to repeat it probably ideally once a year or every other year. Because one of the interesting things about these kinds of tests, which are focused on looking at the efficacy of your lifestyle, how well are you aging?
Eficacia de tu estilo de vida. Efficacy, the effectiveness.
The effectiveness
of your lifestyle.
Of your particular lifestyle is how well are you aging? So let's say you do a test at time 0, at whatever age you are.
What do you mean time 0? I'm sorry.
The first time you do this test.
Okay.
The first time you do the test is now you see, where do I stand up to this point in time of my life? How have my genetic factors, where I've lived, how I've lived, influenced on how fast or slowly I've aged compared to thousands of other people in our database? Now the question is, how fast am I aging? Well, for that you need 2 points. You need to be able to draw the slope of a line. You don't know the rate of aging unless you have multiple measurements.
Okay, that's why you suggest once a year.
Yeah, that's why this is a longitudinal test. And if you think about most tests that are done in what we call preventive medicine, that is a checkup, that's the way they work. When you go to see the doctor, he doesn't measure your blood pressure and say, Richard, your blood pressure is 12/8, 120/80 in the United States. You're great. We're never going to measure this again. He measures your blood pressure every time you visit him. He measures your glucose every time you visit him. He measures your cholesterol every time you visit him.
Look at the trend.
Because he needs to see the trend. Because just because you have good levels now, it doesn't mean in a couple of years, maybe your diet changes, maybe something is changing in your metabolism. So it needs to be tracked over time, because what those tests offer is insight that allows you to take decisions around your health. It's like having...
Insight, ladies and gentlemen, means simply, information, basically.
Yeah, visibility.
Yeah. Yes.
If we think... What always astonishes me is we think about the dashboards, that we have in cars, all the gauges that tell us how the car is performing.
Dashboard, ladies and gentlemen, is an instrument panel. All right. Salpicadero is what they say in Spanish. Right. Interesting word.
So, inside a car, you have something. If the engine's overheating, the light goes on. If the car needs oil, the light goes on. If it's time for maintenance, the light goes on. Well, we don't have a salpicadero on our foreheads.
Oh, I have one on my chest here, just a dashboard.
But we have the opportunity to do these kinds of laboratory tests, and the laboratory testing that is available to people today is astonishing, and it's only improving. And the focus of this is to change, I'm going to use a nice word, the paradigm of medicine, which historically has been reactive.
Okay.
So meaning, I don't really worry about my health until I've got a problem. When I'm sick, I only go to the doctor when I'm really ill.
Okay.
The problem with that is if we pretend to live in a society where people are going to live into their 80s and 90s and beyond routinely, we have to be more proactive about our health, because we can't get to those ages and be healthy and have physical and mental autonomy, most of us, if we don't adopt healthy lifestyles, including monitoring these kinds of critical biomarkers.
Yeah. Healthy lifestyle is more boring. But in any case, okay.
Well, for me, if you think about it, it may sound boring, but when you don't have your health, no matter how much money you have, you suddenly realize how important it is.
Yes. Yeah, there's certain things that are basic necessities, even Maslow's pyramid or hierarchy of needs. Health is right there at the base. If you don't have that, the rest is superfluous. It's useless if you don't have health.
And I think increasingly people realize this. If you look at the emergence of the trend towards, for example, organic foods and the awareness that people have of things like smoking and all of these things that years ago didn't exist, I think more and more people understand that the daily decisions that we take and how we live our lives really does, over time, influence our health span. So the testing that we're doing is giving this insight into how well are you aging and affording people to monitor this progress. And also, and we can talk more about this, it's also very valuable in major age-related diseases, because ultimately aging is the process that leads to downstream. You were talking about upstream and downstream. So downstream from aging is everything that worries us. Cardiovascular disease, having a heart attack, cancer, developing diabetes, problems with your kidneys and your liver. And all of that is related to telomere length, because as the telomeres are shortening, we're losing this replicative capacity of these tissues, and therefore their function is declining, and we're developing problems.
So by undergoing a blood analysis and the diagnostics, we know not only our biological age, more or less, but we know how close we are to entering dangerous territory.
Yeah, especially when this test is performed in combination with a thorough checkup and you have a number of other biomarkers to look at. The physicians that we work with can often gain insight about the diseases that you may be at risk of developing and try to ameliorate or diminish the onset of those diseases or postpone their emergence.
Life changes, diet changes, whatever.
That's right.
Or okay.
Right.
So I did a test many years ago. I have to go back and do one again. Would you recommend I do another test?
I would. We'll arrange that.
Yeah. All right. But as the years progress, as time progresses, will the cost of this test come down?
I think it will. It will continue to come down. We've made enormous strides in our laboratory towards automating the way that we analyze the samples. This test, let me share a little bit with the audience some of the science that sits behind this test. The objects that we're measuring, the telomeres and the chromosomes, are measured in billionths of a meter, in nanometers.
Okay, nanometers, nanómetros. Billions, mil millones de
un metro.
De un metro, okay.
So these objects are so tiny that they cannot be seen under a conventional microscope. You cannot look at them with an optical microscope. So we use a technology, our own technology, which we call TAT, for telomere analysis technology, or in Spanish, Tecnología de Análisis Telomérico, which allows us to use certain chemicals that will cause the telomeres, and only the telomeres, to fluoresce under a certain frequency of a laser. This is called confocal microscopy.
All right.
And we'll measure millions of points of light and process this with computers to generate the result.
All right. This is interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, we're with Steve Matlin. He's the founder, promoter, and chief executive of LifeLength, a Spanish startup and high-tech company in the area of medical research and really of solutions it's a cutting edge. We say the cutting edge, which means en la punta tecnológica of medical technology. And you can get information on lifelength.com. Just go into LifeLength, o sea, longitud vital, vida, longitud, todo junto, lifelength.com, and you can get a lot of